What is up, guys? It's the Sound Alchemist, part of One Mind Syndicate, and today I'm back to talk about Warhammer 40k. In this one, we'll be going over an excerpt from the book, Duty Unto Death, which is going to be pitting two factions that you don't really see go up against each other that often, and that is none other than the Adeptus Custodes and the Tyranids. When you think of the Custodes, they play more of a defensive type of gameplay, if you want to call it that, when it comes to the lore of 40k. Their only goal is to defend Terra, because their only goal is to defend the body of the Emperor. And for the longest time, that's all they did. They shut themselves on Terra, and they allowed nobody to get inside the Golden Throne. However, with Guilliman's return, and in recent times, they've been more proactive instead of retroactive, and they're actually able to go out into the galaxy and fight against the threats against Terra before they become bigger threats. And that includes the Tyranids. So with that being said, guys, let's go ahead and see how these 6 Adeptus Custodes fare when they're fighting against an entire tendril of the Hive mind. A single pod cut through the toxic fumes and the burning sky, hammering into the center of the plane and the milling confusion of the alien horde. There was an instant realignment, like constellations suddenly clarified in the heavens. The army turned as one, unified by singular purpose once more. The thing that which tore itself free from the spore pod was immense, the pinnacle of genetic mastery and a paragon of inhuman might. The greatest bio-scholars of Terra could not decide whether it was a consciousness in its own right, or an immune response of that of the Hive, brought unto being when the tide was set against it. The Swarm Lord raised its head and bellowed as it rushed forward to meet his adversaries. It closed the distance in what seemed like mere moments, a blur, a storm given form. Blades scissored down against the custodians. They blocked, even their movements slightly too slow. Bioelectric fields warred with the power fields of their weapons in a whine of feedback and a shower of sparks. It forced Varamak to his knees, and the great cleaver blade descended, burying itself in the armor of its neck. There was a spasm and a gout of blood, and he had only a moment to drive his spear up and into its flesh before he fell. Another massive loss. Natrius ducked under its guard and slashed across its chest, but the Swarm Lord brought all 4 of its blades to bear. It pinned Natrius, blades barely containing him as he struggled, blood coating them in furious smears. The custodian's spear fell from his grasp, and the Swarm Lord cast him into the dust. Only Tamerlane remained. He broke into a run, swinging his axe as he advanced. The heavy Castellan blade impacted against one of the bone swords, chipping it. There was no surprise in its dead eyes, only a snarl of alien hate. "This is his domain," Tamerlane said, not caring whether or not it could understand. "I am his servant, and you shall not end me with my duty yet undone." He moved beneath its dance of blades, feeling them scrape against his armor. Turned aside by angle, speed, and the armor's inherent strength. It snarled, dripping venom as it stabbed down at him. He dropped to his knees, his hands finding Natrius' spear. "Forgive me," he whispered, and drove the unpowered blade up with such force that it cracked the monster's armored sternum. It slammed one of its bladed limbs into his side, and he brought his axe up again. An arm flew free in a gush of sour fluid, and it bathed him aside with that of another blade. They were evenly matched, opposites, mirrors, one the pinnacle of human genetic mastery, the other a crescendo of accelerated hyper-evolution. One was golden, the other base. They fought down the burning slopes, even as the Tyranid swarm wove around them in a tightening noose. By-blows obliterated swaths of brood organisms. The Swarm Lord did not care if it scythed its own, as it drove Tamerlane back. He fought with every century of his experience behind him. He could feel the names carved into his armor, pressed against his flesh. Each carried a burden. He moved as fast as he was able to, raising his axe to block and parry, or to cut and slash. Their melee devolved into a grinding brawl, drawn out and bitter. He tensed as he fought, feeling the dull ache of fatigue. He struck for its thorax, cleaving it open even as it brought two of its blades around. It pincered him in place. He felt something break in his armor systems, his gauntlet clenching in palsy. He closed his eyes and focused. It was more grueling and more intense than any blood game he had run in the service of the throne. More pressing than any battle of his long years. He felt his fingers close, finally, around the hilt of his Messecordia dagger, and he pulled it free. He pushed it up and drove it into the thing's snarling visage. Dissonators' spirits engaged with a flare, and the blade blazed golden for a glorious instant as it sank through flesh and chitin. The beast screamed, every last one of them howling in animalistic agony. Tamerlane kicked out his leg and drove the dying monster back. Behind him the world roared again, in sympathetic victory. As below, so above. The fleet that swept into the system was attired and tarnished yellow, not sacred gold. Battle barges and strike cruisers unleashed their explosive payloads into the heart of the looming alien fleet. The Hive ships seemed sluggish, distracted as they turned their ponderous arcs. Only a few weapon symbiotes were able to hurl themselves into the void, to die in their final bursts of biological imperative. They smeared against active void shields with only the faintest pulse of light and heat. At the head of this relief fleet was the battle barge Inglorious Purpose, its slab sides marked with old scars. It drew ahead of the rest of the ships, raking the Tyranids with ferocious broadsides as it rolled in to load its orbit. Bombardment cannons fired, rending the fickle atmosphere and adding new scars to the world's harsh surface. A mountain detonated under their guns, in a mega eruption which hurled debris into the void itself. "Take us down," Captain Ignis Vroll growled. "Find the signal." The world was dying, terminally wounded by the collision of warring factions. Vroll strode down the ramp and onto the ash plains, already buffeted by the pyroclastic winds. He spat and watched the ashes sizzle before casting his eyes up. He beheld a fortress, wrought of victory. The corpses of the Tyranids had been utilized, not as grim totems of war or fear, but as once living brick and mortar. Spurs of bone and chitin held the walls in place, adding to the solid foundations of hewn basalt, which they augmented. The flesh of the beasts was seared, blackened, and had run together in places, further annealing the materials together. Before it knelt a lone warrior, so still and gray that it seemed another victim of the calamity, an ashen sculpture of ruin. But he moved, and the Space Marines jerked their weapons up. Vroll did not bother, merely sneering with bemused disdain. "Who goes there?" he asked. "We answered a priority transmission, swathed in clearances fit for a chapter master, and all we find is you?" "I am Tamerlane," the survivor said, "shield captain of the Adeptus Custodes." He forced himself to his feet and gestured. Behind him, the techno-arcane mechanisms of the sarcophagus hovered like a relic of ancient Egyptus. His brothers and their arms were laying upon the Primus Gene cache, like honored kings. "I bear word from Terra, and the promise of the future. I bring the means by which the brotherhood, such as yours, shall weather these nights of fire and blood." He touched his fingers to the casket. "And you shall help me bring it to where it is needed most. That is my duty in his name." And with that, I bring you this epic excerpt of a bunch of Adeptus Custodes, which it wasn't a bunch, it was just a handful. I think it was 6 in total, but the excerpt where I started, there's only 3 left. But yeah, they did it. They lasted long enough for help to arrive, and at the end of the day, a single Custodes survived. But this was enough to quell the entire tendril of the Tyranids until reinforcements came. So you could see just how badass the Swarm Lord is, taking out 2 Custodes and falling to the 3rd. And we could even see that there were so many dead Tyranids that he built essentially like a wall of Tyranids and just fought until he could not move. That just shows you the strength, the tenacity, and the overall power of the Adeptus Custodes. So whenever you hear of like 100,000 orcs versus 1,000 Custodes, and like I think only like 2 Custodes die, that really shows you just how powerful these guys are. But yeah, let me know your thoughts down below. Do you think the Tyranids should have been able to do more to the Custode? Do you think the Custode was kind of shown to actually exercise the strength that they're capable of? And because when we see earlier or later excerpts from like the Norn's emissaries taking on the Custodes, they do really, really well, to the point where like a emissary of Norn can take out like a whole squad of Custodes. So you could really see just how powerful the HQs, the actual warriors of the hive mind, can be. But that's all I got for today, guys. So again, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more things Warhammer 40k. And as always, it's been the Sound Alchemist, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next one. Peace.